This video is about teams that have never won a Super Bowl. Teams that have never won a Super Bowl. Okay, let's start with the NFC Central, which is now the North. This is the oldest division in the NFL. The NFC Central used to be called the Black and Blue Division because of the hard-hitting and rough play. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers used to be part of the NFC Central until the NFL started realigning teams and putting them where they should be. And I'm going to start with the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have been in the league since 1930, a very long time. They won 4 championships. Their last championship was in 1957 to beat the Cleveland Browns 59-14. In 1957, your star running back name was Howard Hopalong Cassidy. He was a Heisman Trophy winner from Ohio State, then won an NFL title with the Lions. But even with the great Barry Sanders as running back in the 90s, the Detroit Lions have never been to a Super Bowl. This is like one of those jokes you hear. The last time your team won a championship was so long ago that your quarterback's picture was a drawing. Alright, staying in the NFC North, the next team to have never won a Super Bowl are the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings joined the NFL as an expansion team in 1960 and first took the field for the 1961 season. If it's one team in the NFL that I can say I feel sorry for, it is the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings of the 70s were a great team. They played in and lost 4 Super Bowls. 4 Super Bowls. But they were a great team. They had a great defense, good offense, but the defense was nasty. The defense nickname were the Purple People Eaters. They had 2 good quarterbacks. Fran Tarkenton, who was like Roger Staubach, he was the scrambler, and you had Joe Kapp. The team was so good during the regular season, they would kill people and then get to the Super Bowl and lose it all. Just act like they didn't know what they were doing. One of the craziest plays in the NFL was when the Vikings were playing the San Francisco 49ers and Jim Marshall recovered a fumble and ran 66 yards the wrong way into his own end zone. Here are the scores of all the Vikings Super Bowl losses. Next up is the NFC West. The Arizona Cardinals are the only team in the West that hasn't won a Super Bowl. The Arizona Cardinals is the oldest team in the NFL. They were formed in 1898. The Arizona Cardinals used to be the St. Louis Cardinals, and they were part of the NFC East at one time. The Cardinals never won a Super Bowl and never played in the Super Bowl, but they had some good players like Jackie Smith, the tight end that ended up going to Dallas, and he almost won a Super Bowl, but he dropped the pass from Roger Staubach. The hard-hitting cornerback Pat Fisher, who later played for the Washington Redskins, and wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald. The NFC East The NFC East, better known as the NFC Beast. The NFC East is the first and only division where every team has won a Super Bowl, at least one. The Eagles won 1, the Redskins won 3, the Giants won 4, the Patriots killer, and the Cowboys won 5. The Cowboys are the true beast of the East. The NFC East is the best division in the NFL, and they got the Super Bowl rings to prove it. The NFC South. Every team in the NFC South has been to a Super Bowl, but the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons have never won a Super Bowl. The Atlanta Falcons came into the league in 1966. The Falcons played in 2 Super Bowls. The first one they lost to the Denver Broncos, 34-19. And the second Super Bowl they lost to the New England Patriots, 34-28. They played in Super Bowl 51, which a lot of people think that game was fixed because the Falcons was up 28-3 in the third quarter. And somehow, miraculously, the Patriots came back and won. Some famous football players came from the Atlanta Falcons, like Deion Sanders, Brett Favre, Eric Dickerson, Tony Gonzalez. But when I think about the Atlanta Falcons, I think about Jamal Anderson doing that Dirty Bird dance. You can see him with Dan Reeves, the coach. The Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers came into the league in 1995 along with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have been to 2 Super Bowls in their short existence, but lost both of them. In 2004, they played in Super Bowl 38. They lost to the New England Patriots, 32-29. A close game. In 2016, they played in Super Bowl 50. They lost to the Denver Broncos 24-10. One thing I remember about that Super Bowl is Cam Newton jumping back from a fumbled football. When I think about the Carolina Panthers, I think about Stephen Davis, who was the number 1 rushing running back for the Washington Redskins, and then coach Steve Spurrier traded him to the Panthers, and the Panthers went on to go to the Super Bowl the following year. I also think about Stephen Davis and Deshaun Foster, who was running like Barry Sanders when they was playing the Patriots in that Super Bowl. They could not stop this guy, and he mysteriously disappeared by the fourth quarter. And I also think about the wide receiver, Ray Caruth, who hired a hitman to kill his baby mama, Sharika Adams, but she ended up having the kid anyway before she died. And he was born crippled. The AFC North. It's only 2 teams in the AFC North that has won a Super Bowl, the Ravens and the Steelers. The Browns and Bengals have never won a Super Bowl. The Cleveland Browns came into the league in 1946, named after their owner and founder, Paul Brown. The Cleveland Browns won 3 championships back in the 50s with Paul Brown as head coach. They won their last championship in 1964. when they had Jim Brown as a running back and they beat the Baltimore Colts 27-0. Jim Brown was one of the greatest running backs to ever play in the NFL. Some say the greatest. Even to this day, when you think of the Browns, you think of Jim Brown. The Cleveland Browns have never won a Super Bowl. The Cleveland Browns have never played in a Super Bowl. The Cincinnati Bengals came into the league in 1968. They were founded by Paul Brown, the same man who founded the Cleveland Browns. The Bengals won the AFC Championship in 1981 and 1988, but lost Super Bowls 16 and 23 to the San Francisco 49ers. Even to this day, when I think about the Bengals, I think about Ickey Woods and the Ickey Shuffle. The AFC East. The Buffalo Bills have played in and lost 4 Super Bowls. They came into the league in 1960. The Buffalo Bills had some good players, but like the Vikings, they could never win the big one. They lost to the Cowboys twice, the Washington Redskins, and their closest Super Bowl came down to a field goal when they lost to the Giants. When Scott Norwood's field goal went wide right, it gave the New York Giants the thrill of victory, and Scott Norwood the agony of defeat. The AFC South. The only team in the AFC South that has won a Super Bowl is the Indianapolis Colts. And to me, that team should still be the Baltimore Colts. The Tennessee Titans started out as the Houston Oilers in the 1960s. Once again, I hate all this name changing because it messes up the legacy. The Houston Oilers used to be a good team. They had Earl Campbell as running back. In the year 2000, the Tennessee Titans played in Super Bowl 34. They lost to the St. Louis Rams 23-16. And I remember the Rams. Dick Vermeil was the head coach. He used to be the coach for the Eagles back in the 80s. The Titans had a good team. They had Steve McNair, Air McNair they called him, who ended up getting killed by his girlfriend. And they had Eddie George as running back, who later played with the Dallas Cowboys. The Jacksonville Jaguars are one of the newer teams. They came into the league in 1995. They've never been to a Super Bowl. The Houston Texans. The Houston Texans came into the league in 2002. They have never been or played in a Super Bowl.